Hey everybody, Mike Toy Bonsai Boise. So here's a ficus bonsai that I've got. I don't actually have a name for it yet. Maybe I should come up with something. I've had it about 5 years. A friend of mine gave it to me, and I believe he bought it at a big box store, just as one of those commercial type bonsais. I did a lot of research to figure out what exactly this was. I had heard Ficus retusa, I heard Ficus microcarpa, heard all kinds of things, and there's a lot of misconceptions about ficuses out there. Turns out, there's actually two different types of ficus. It is a green island ficus on top, grafted onto what I believe is a Ficus retusa. It could actually be all kinds of different things on the bottom part. But they do that because green island ficus has smaller leaves and more compact, and whereas the Ficus retusas have larger trunks and more interesting trunks. So today I'm going to repot it into this pot. I've had it in this old oval shaped pot for basically the whole time I've had it, and it's always been sort of borderline too big for it. So I wanted to maybe find it a new home, and I thought this was a good fit. So it's not quite as deep. It's a shallower pot, but it's a lot wider and longer. Yeah, so that's a beginning look at it. And as for the foliage, it's got some pretty decent ramification, but I am going to trim it back pretty good and healthy trim today. And the reason is that a couple of reasons. One, it just has to be done periodically, and two, some of these branches are kind of long and straight, and it just has, for example, like you'll get a better look in a minute, but some of them are just long with a branch coming out of each side 3 or 4 times down the row. So it looks like a nice full branch, but it doesn't really have a lot of movement to it. And there's a lot of long internodes in there. So by trimming it back to its first point of foliage, it will just give the branch more movement. Instead of a long straight branch with a couple of branches coming out each side, it'll be, shorter internode and then curve off to one side and then curve off to another. Not sure if I'm explaining that as well, but it makes more sense when you see it. And also it does help with some taper. These branches aren't super thick, so probably won't be anything too noticeable for taper, but it still helps over the course of time. I don't know if these green island ficus can be, I don't know if you can defoliate them. So I'm being kind of careful here to make sure I don't prune back too far to the point that, we would risk a branch just dying off. So there's a good example of a long straight branch right there. So I'm just trying to reduce those a little bit and get the foliage even more compact and get those internodes even shorter. Structurally speaking, I'll say this isn't the stereotypical type of structure you would want, where you have a trunk that divides into 2 branches and then 2 branches into 4 branches. This is more like one trunk that goes up and then splits off 4 different ways. One goes straight up, one goes to the back, one goes to the front, one goes off to the side. And it's okay. It's not like, it has perfect taper on the trunk already. You can see it's got like 4 different trunk legs, I'll call it. But I'm going to do a little work to that too, which you'll see in a minute. So you can see it's starting to thin out already. Some of these bonsai projects, you trim them up and you repot them and they look better. They just look good, like fresh out of the spa or something. Got a haircut. Other times you do it and it looks, at first glance, it looks worse. I mean, let's be honest. I'm sure we've all seen videos where somebody did a repot and a trim, and afterward you're just like, wow, that looks worse than it started. And that's sometimes the case, but it's more of a long run type thing. So this has lots of roots coming out of the top, out of the bottom, and I think I just repotted it last year too, so this is good and healthy. And it is a small pot, so it doesn't take too long to fill up. Pretty rooty in there. So I'll just work to kind of loosen up that soil a little bit so we can see how the root system looks. Yeah, I will say it sparked a bit of a debate. One of the first videos I posted on this, I posted it as a Ficus Retusa, because that's what I thought it was. And it was quite the debate. Some people said, no, it's not, it's microcarpa. No, it's not, it's something else. And it turns out there actually is a lot of confusion around different Ficus varieties. And I won't go too into the weeds, but some of it just stems back to when they were first imported. They were labeled incorrectly. And so a lot of them, even their official name is wrong. And then they get grafted together. And so then it's like, well, which one is it? Is it this or is it that? So, yeah, there's a lot of confusion out there about it. But after a lot of research, I can tell you this one in particular, and probably most of them that you see, are Ficus, Green Island Ficus grafted onto Ficus Retusa. And that's a look at my soil mix, by the way. So here are the roots. I think I'm going to get rid of that fourth root. That one is kind of like a leg crossing, like it's crossing its front legs or something. Kind of reminds me of a centaur. I think that's the right name, a horseman. But I don't like it, so it's got to go. And off it goes. For whatever reason, I think it just looks better now. It's like a tripod. It makes more sense instead of a tripod with one leg crossing over. I'm not going to get too crazy with root pruning. I'm just going to prune them back and make a few choice selections. Get them moving in the right directions. So the roots look nice and healthy. This tree, I have to admit, has always been a trooper. It's probably one of my lowest maintenance trees. It just sort of does its thing and grows. It doesn't need a lot of attention. I really don't even have to trim it that often. Maybe once or twice a year. This is the hardest I've ever trimmed it back today. And to me, it's still weird because it's only ever been in that oval pot. So now seeing it in a different pot, it's like a stranger to me almost. It's a whole different tree. So I'll just take a minute to work all of the soil into the roots. Make sure there's no gaps. Give it a good rinse. And here's a semi-finished look. I actually like it. Kind of looks like a stick man almost. Like his head and his arms coming out. If he had 3 arms. But I gotta say I'm happy with it. I think he's got a lot of room to grow in there. I trimmed back the branches and the leaves quite a bit to give them room to grow. So while it looks a little... Yeah, I was playing around with getting rid of the top part, but I'm glad I didn't. Sometimes you can get trim happy. You start trimming and then the next one's a little easier, and next thing you know, cuts just get easier on each one. So I'm glad I had the discipline to not cut its head off there. But yeah, it looks a little goofy and a little sparse compared to how it started, but it's set up good for the long run. It's got room to grow. The leaves all can get a lot of good light. I tried to be strategic so that the branches that were left were spread out in such a way that they had room to ramify and grow. The top part is a little straight, so I still am not super happy with it. I might try and wire it, or I might just hope that it back buds, which would allow me to trim the top part off. We'll see how it goes. I don't always have to get drastic, only on certain trees sometimes. This one I stayed kind of conservative halfway. But I appreciate you watching. Thanks for watching, and have a good rest of your day, everybody.